Filmspotting is presented by Regal Unlimited, the all-you-can-watch movie subscription pass that pays for itself in just 2 visits. Sign up now in the Regal app or at the link in the show description and use code FILMSPOT25, that's FILMSPOT25, to receive your discount.
The last thing you want to hear when you need your auto insurance most is a robot with countless irrelevant menu options. Which is why with USAA Auto Insurance, you'll get great service that is easy and reliable, all at the touch of a button. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
USAA. What kind of a show are you guys putting on here today?
You're not interested in art?
No.
Now look, we're going to do this thing. We're going to have a conversation.
From Chicago, this is Filmspotting. I'm Josh Larson.
And I'm Adam Kempenaar.
Did he just say you were getting married?
Yes, I proposed right before she got herself arrested.
Before I got myself arrested, actually you got me arrested when you asked me to hold your teener and my weave. You're like, oh, Cindy, the cops are coming. Why don't you hold my teener?
That's from Sean Baker's Tangerine, which turns 10 this year.
Baker won 4 Oscars back in March for Anora. That same Oscars weekend, we screened Tangerine as part of Filmspotting Fest. Our post-screening conversation with Vulture's Alison Willmore is ahead.
Plus, the Filmspotting Madness Final 4 and more. It's all ahead.
Merry Christmas Eve, bitch.
Filmspotting.
Switch to Verizon Business and get more from your internet without paying more for your internet. Get LTE Business Internet starting at $39 a month when paired with select business mobile plans. That's unlimited data, and with it, unlimited possibilities. Start saving today with Verizon Business, ranked #1 in small business internet customer satisfaction by J.D. Power. Starting price for 25 megabits per second LTE internet plan with smartphone plan savings, plus taxes, fees, and economic adjustment charge. Terms apply. For J.D. Power 2024 award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Welcome to Filmspotting, and welcome back from Boulder, Colorado. Josh, how are you feeling? Rumor has it you just got waylaid by some kind of virus while you were out there. Is it like when I was too scared to talk about 2001: A Space Odyssey and had some kind of
That's right.
visceral physical reaction to it? Is that what happened with you in The Wizard of Oz?
I forgot about that. No, I was so excited to talk The Wizard of Oz, and we got off to a great start. Day 1, we watched it in the afternoon, just a few hours before Cynthia Erivo came for the keynote speech and shared some wicked stories. That was all great. Day 1 of Interrupting went off fine. And then, that second day of Interrupting, the night before, something got me, Adam, and got me bad. So I have to thank Boulder Weekly film critic Michael J. Casey, who always helps out with Interruptus. He stepped in and led that particular session along with Jamie Kreutz, who's the chair of the Conference on World Affairs Film Committee. So the two of them handled it. Everyone plowed through, got us going, and I rallied, I think, to show up for the final session. We did make it through the end of the film. And I rallied enough. Later on in the show, I'll do some shout outs for the Filmspotting meetup. I was able to at least kick off that same night. But that put the recovery back a little bit. So I'm still struggling a tad. But Adam, the real news buzzing around Boulder, of course, is that Sundance is moving there in 2027. And it's like the first thing anybody brought up when they, saw me and knew of my film background or would learn of it. They would ask, have you been to Sundance? Are you going to come back? And as I told you, and as I told Sam, one of the things I did while I was out there is be sure to secure us some Filmspotting housing in case we can pull off a Sundance trip in 2027. We got a place to stay at least.
That's very good to hear, because I do think this move is going to mark Filmspotting's return to Sundance. It's always a little bit of an iffy time for me because it happens at the end of January, right when classes are resuming for the spring semester. So I can't stay out there the entire time, but I think a good Thursday night to Sunday may be in the works. I don't think I've been to Sundance since 2010, right around 2010. And I do think being in Boulder, it makes the travel a little bit easier coming from where I am now. I can get a direct flight out to Denver, can get to Boulder a little easier than I could getting to Salt Lake City and then off to Park City from there. And also, Kevin Rich, who is my college roommate and is kind of the reason Filmspotting exists, because he's the person who back around 2000 said, I have to introduce you to this guy I'm now hanging out with in Chicago named Sam. I think you'd really like him. You guys would really hit it off. He is a theater professor at Boulder. So a reason for Sam and I to go out there and hang out with Kevin in addition to hanging out with you and watching a lot of movies.
Yeah, it's nice to have some connections in Boulder. The town itself is beautiful, as I've come to learn going there the last maybe 7 or 8 years. Now, the couple of times I went to Sundance in Park City was amazing. I mean, just that setting, that locale, I had a great time. But yeah, it's nice that this is going to be an opportunity, it sounds like, for all of us to get back there.
Well, Michael Phillips and I had a good time without you. We had a wonderful discussion of Joe Wright's Pride and Prejudice, and I did have the revelation. I know why everyone so adores this movie now. And the top 5 rain scenes was really fun as well. So it was good to do an old school show.
I got to give it to you. I have to listen to the whole show, but I did peek at that top 5 list because I was intrigued by the idea. You going My Neighbor Totoro. I mean, I could quibble maybe with the placement at 5. I would have definitely gone higher, but not only, that scene as a rain scene, but maybe one of my favorite Miyazaki scenes. I've led a workshop on that scene at a few colleges because I talk about it in Movies Are Prayers and Totoro as a prayer of joy. It is, just chef's kiss. Nice work there, sir.
Thank you. Well, you were there in spirit via my top 5, Josh, even though you weren't here last week. It's good to have you back this week on Filmspotting. Yes, it's still Filmspotting Madness time, best of the 21st century so far, though we are winding down. We started back in early March with 64 films. We are down to the final 4, and voting is live in those final 4 matchups right now. Filmspotting.net/madness if you have not voted already. Also, later in the show, a highlight from Filmspotting Fest, our weekend-long celebration of 20 years of podcasting back in March. It's a Q&A with Vulture critic Alison Willmore that followed our screening of Sean Baker's Tangerine. The very same weekend of that screening, Baker went on to win an armful of Oscars. That's exactly how we planned it, right, Josh?
Yeah, they call it the Filmspotting bump.
Also, Project Tarkovsky gets underway. We're knocking out the Andrei Tarkovsky filmography, our respective blind spots anyway. This week, 2 early films from the Russian master. His student film, 1961's The Steamroller and the Violin, which puts maybe every other student film ever made to shame. And his feature debut, which might also put a lot of feature debuts to shame, Ivan's Childhood from 1962. If you would like to see the full lineup and more about our marathons, visit filmspotting.net/marathons. Before we get to that Tangerine Q&A with Allison, we did both catch up with something new over the weekend, separate movies. The Fishing Place. This is a World War II drama, maybe a bit of coincidence spotting with Ivan's Childhood. This week, I believe it's playing at Facet's Film Forum in Chicago this weekend. What should we know about it, Josh?
First, I have to make a confession here. The title and the subject and the setting and all that intrigued me about The Fishing Place. So I looked into it a little bit more, came to realize the director here, Rob Tregenza, an American indie stalwart with whom I just have not been familiar, but he's been doing work for many years. Gavagai is a film of his, and Talking to Strangers as well. Probably listeners know those. I sadly did not, and was glad to be introduced to his work with The Fishing Place because it's quite good. It's especially going to appeal to aficionados of very long, very contemplative single takes. That is primarily what The Fishing Place is composed of, even though it has this, I don't know if you'd want to call it a genre setting, but a somewhat familiar story of this set in this village in Norway during World War II, Nazi occupied, centers mostly on 3 characters, a Nazi officer played by Frode Winther, a housekeeper played by Ellen Dorrit Peterson, and then a German minister played by Andreas Lust, who she is forced to spy on by the Nazi officer. But as I said, these are all vignettes, and Tregenza employs it's a modest crane. So I think sometimes we think of these huge Hollywood production size cranes, but you see it later in the film. Won't spoil exactly how, and it essentially can be housed on the back of a pickup truck, it looks like. And he even uses this for interior scenes. So these are unbroken takes that are moving around the room. The interesting thing is it doesn't necessarily immerse you in the moment or in the world the way you might expect. I did learn that Tregenza also served as cinematographer on Bela Tar's Werkmeister Harmonies, which is just this masterful, meditation that consists of these 39 extended single takes as well. But that creates this world. It's kind of centered on a traveling circus, this world that you are fully immersed in and succumb to. Whereas the fishing place, I did feel for me was more of a calculated intellectual exercise. Many of the moments feel like experimental theater in a way, more than cinema, oddly. So, I'm not sure how that might register for some people. Some people might love it and really thrill at that sort of attempt and that sort of style. The movie also breaks the fourth wall for its final 30 minutes in a very fascinating way that might work for some viewers and might not for others. So I would definitely recommend it for its originality. If, like me, you are not familiar with Tregenza, I think it's a good place to start because of that setting, and that familiarity brings you into it. So yeah, that's the fishing place. And as you said, Adam, it is playing at Facets Film Forum here in Chicago. I think there are going to be 2 showings on Saturday, April 19, if you do want to catch it. And I know you and Michael gave a little nod to Facets on their 50th anniversary this year on last week's show, and just wanted to chime in and add my congratulations. And also, just say thank you for what they've done over the years, not just for the film community, but for me. I've gotten to know the current executive director, Karen Cardarelli, and marketing manager, I should say, Emma Greenleaf in recent years. Emma helped me with a screening and a book talk around Talk to Me about 2 years ago now, in promotion of my horror book, Fear Not, when I was launching that. And my ties actually go back even further with Facets. I think I've shared this once on the show before, but go back to summer of 96, just graduated from college. I'm going to make it as a film critic, Adam. I may not have a job as a film critic, but you know what? I've got some freelance connections. I get a few regular gigs at the Daily Southtown and elsewhere. So surely I can build a career on this, right? Well, you got to pay the bills too. So while doing that, get a job in the mailroom of Facets, which they were like direct VHS to, it was like way before Netflix. These are VHS tapes, hard to find titles, right? Like foreign language titles, international titles, independent titles. If you wanted to watch them on VHS, oftentimes the only place in the United States to get it was Facets. So down in the basement in a way back room was a team of people just mailing these out. And that's where I worked. That's where I made the steady paycheck. Worked with a guy, shout out to my coworker, who wore like a Crocodile Dundee style hat and a knife, a massive knife on his belt to match. I don't know why, every day. Hope you're doing well out there. You were a little intimidating, but always nice to me also. But it was a great job at the time because I got to read the backs of all those VHS cassette tapes, right? And learn about these movies as this aspiring critic that maybe I'd only heard of and got to see, who was involved, the credits, that sort of stuff you do when you have a job like that. And yeah, my supervisor at the time got me onto a Chicago International Film Festival, like documentary short jury, because he knew I was interested in criticism. So, even though I was in the mailroom, just a great place to kind of be soaking up that culture. So Facet's a big part of my life over the years. So many others here in Chicago. So major congrats on 50 years of influence and hopefully many more.
I didn't know that story, and I didn't mention this last week with Michael, but when I was a film student here in Chicago for a spell, I didn't live too far from Facets, and you can imagine I was a frequent visitor, Josh, especially if you're in film school and in a directing class, they're showing you something like La Ventura, and you're so stunned by it that you say, oh, there's 2 more films that are part of this trilogy? How do I see La Notte? How do I see Les Eclipses? The only place you could get those films.
Yep.
At that time was at Facets. So it was indispensable. And then later, fast forward a few years from your time in the mailroom, Josh, Facets is now doing the Netflix model. They have DVDs and they're mailing out DVDs. Sam and I used to get so many films from Facets. It wasn't just Netflix. How did we watch films that were part of our marathons? We got some of these titles that were largely overlooked, that were blind spots for us because we could get them via Facet. So as long as that service existed, we were regular subscribers.
Yeah, rich source now and then.
The Fishing Place, as Josh said, currently out in limited release and again playing this Saturday, April 19th at Facets in Chicago. I caught up with a movie that hit New York and LA just at the end of March, expanded to Chicago and some additional markets on April 4th, and then hit some other markets like Iowa City just this past weekend, the 11th. It's The Ballad of Wallis Island, directed by James Griffiths. It's about an eccentric UK lottery winner, Tim Keith's Charles Heath, who lives alone on the remote island of the title. He invites his favorite musician, Tom Basden's Herb Maguire, to perform a private gig. Unbeknownst to Herb, Charles also invites the singer's ex-bandmate and ex-lover, Carey Mulligan's Nell, to reunite for the gig. They were this folk duo known as Maguire-Mortimer.
I didn't really listen to your songs back in the day.
Is this my guitar? Yeah, got that at auction.
Oh, wow, you are a fan.
My favourite is always Maguire-Mortimer. Your music changed everything.
He's going to get his guitar.
Oh, has he? Has he? Ah.
If you need some affection and you're feeling all alone.
Very different from The Fishing Place, from what it sounds like, Josh, though another movie focused on 3 characters. Your mileage may entirely depend on where Tim Key's Charles falls for you on the annoying versus endearing scale. To call him socially awkward would be underselling it intensely. He has no real sense of personal space. He does not stop talking ever, and especially tough for you to take, possibly. Around 90% of the words he says and phrases he uses are puns. It's as if he has a compulsion to do it. He cannot help himself. I don't think the intent of that is that we're supposed to find most or maybe any of those puns funny, but every once in a while I did laugh at the sheer absurdity of
he wore you down.
of his desperate verbal maneuvering. It did occasionally feel to me, Josh, like he was a TV sitcom character dropped into this sweet little indie movie. But when the movie does need Charles to be a real human being, he delivers. And what? I wasn't going to go for a movie that's wall-to-wall singer-songwritery folk music with great harmonies. It's more overtly sentimental than Once or Sing Street or John Carney's other films, but the Carney sandbox is the sandbox Wallis Island is playing in, and it's a sandbox I'm particularly fond of, especially when, as in those Carney films, the original songs are legitimately really good, and you're looking up the soundtrack right after you see it or the next day on Spotify or Apple. A lot of those songs that we hear on the soundtrack are played and performed throughout the movie, but there are 3 main music moments. And I give credit to Griffiths as a director because Basden's Hugh is performing, or is one of the performers in each of the 3 scenes I'm referencing. But the camera favors a different character during each tune. The first time, it's Charles who's having the strongest reaction. The second, it's Nell having the epiphany. And finally, it's Hugh. So rather than feeling redundant, the songs expand the film's emotional range. And it is a true 3-hander, each character having their own conflict and resolution, which again gives it some depth that worked enough for me certainly to recommend The Battle of Wallis Island if it's playing near you.
Well, in regard to the pun master, Tim Key, I'm looking him up right now. This is, this might help me out. I don't know if it'll help you out. Apparently he was Pigeon Man in Mickey 17. Remember the guy who was inexplicably dressed as a pigeon mascot for a bunch of the movie?
Yes.
He made me laugh there. So
I think he'll make you laugh here as well. I do. The Ballad of Wallis Island is currently out in limited release. If you see either of the films we just recommended and agree or disagree with us, we'd love to hear from you. Feedback at filmspotting.net.
Hey, Alexandra, come here. Listen, have you seen Cindy?
Cinderella. Looks like someone has a crush.
Cindy's back on the block?
Oh, yeah, she's back. She's back and she's going hard.
Merry Christmas, bro.
Let's get to our conversation with Vulture's Alison Willmore about Sean Baker's Tangerine. We included Tangerine in the first ever Filmspotting Fest back in March for a couple of reasons. It was a Golden Brick winner back in 2015. Baker has been on the show before, and well, everything Baker went on to accomplish after that film, including making Red Rocket and The Florida Project, and yes, Anora winning Oscars for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay, and Best Editing.
Now, Tangerine was not Baker's first feature. He'd actually been making films for a decade before we caught up with him. It was, though, the first film of his that put him on our radar, and for a lot of people had the same experience, I think. Tangerine debuted at Sundance and became known as the movie that was shot on an iPhone 5S. Also notable, Baker's cast was mostly non-professionals. That included the leads, Kitana Kiki Rodriguez and Maya Taylor. In Tangerine, Rodriguez and Taylor are Cindy and Alexandra, trans sex workers in LA who go on a Christmas Eve mission to locate Cindy's pimp, played by James Ransome. The film also spends time with an Armenian taxi driver, Karen Karagulian's Razumik, who is friendly with Taylor's Alexandra. After screening Tangerine, we chatted with Alison about the film.
It's an honor. I mean, just thank you all for being here. It's been so great to see the Filmspotting community out and enjoy movies with you all.
Yeah, if you are a listener of the show, you know Alison has been a regular fixture on the show. But just to give a little bit of background, I think we may have met for the first time back when we were both at Sundance.
That sounds about right. I mean, it's possible Matt and I were doing the IFC podcast.
We were doing the IFC podcast. Yeah. I was at Sundance. I think I appeared on that podcast. Might have been the first time we met. And we'll talk about Matt Singer later and how we met Matt. But through him, got to know you, and you've been a regular contributor over the years to the show and an occasional guest host. And, of course, also Filmspotting SVU. When the IFC News podcast ended, I didn't want to stop hearing Matt and Alison talk about movies together. So we found a reason. How many shows did we get? 160
It was a lot. Yes, it was. I'm not sure if those archives are still around, but we did.
They're still around.
I'm afraid sometimes about what's on there. But the kind of streaming spin-off of Filmspotting, Matt and I did for years, and it was a pleasure. Absolutely.
That still may be the most clever thing I ever came up with. SVU, Streaming Video Unit. It was
unrelated to other franchises.
That's right.
For legal reasons. Yes.
Yeah. So tell us about your relationship to the movie Tangerine. When do you remember seeing it for the first time? What was your reaction?
So I was I must have seen it at Sundance where it had its premiere. But now that I've outsourced all of my memory to social media, and then when social media subsequently turned evil, deleted all of my archives, I've basically don't have any record of that anymore. So I don't think I saw it at the premiere. I think I saw it at one of the later screenings, but I saw it at least one or two times after that before it came out, just because it was a movie that just kept running through my head in that way. There are some movies that are great and then but also there are some movies that are great and also you just keep they get stuck in your head like a song, which is I think the case with this one in particular. There were just multiple scenes that I just couldn't. And it's funny, I haven't seen it for years now. This is the first time I've seen it in years, and I just it's so imprinted on my brain. Like no surprises. Like I remember so many of those scenes just so vividly.
Well, we might get into that a little deeper, some of those scenes, but what were one or two of them in particular that were imprinted on you?
Well, the beginning, certainly. I think it just it starts like it's almost like you're poised at the top of a slope on skis, and as soon as the story starts, you're just it's just in constant motion and the momentum is incredible.
I've been told you this was gonna happen. All men cheat. That's why they're called trade. Do them just as dirty as they do us. Out here, it is all about our hustle, and that's it. What are you plotting?
Sean Baker has made multiple films about sex work, and I think there is something about his interest in that, in particular about, as the characters kind of fight over at the end, the debate about what counts as real or not, which is of course never clear cut, and I think it extends beyond sex work into things about is your gig singing a real gig if you are the one paying for it? What is your family real if you are also sustaining a secret that you and your wife just don't talk about? I think that kind of recurring interest that Sean Baker explores through sex work is something that is really interesting, and I think handled in this very open and humane, but also like very empathetic way.
Yeah, I think I described it maybe when we were talking on the show recently, Adam, but he seems to approach these characters for their humanity first and their circumstances second. And circumstances definitely matter, especially economically often, but they're not how we come to meet the characters or come to know them. That it's almost like a little bit in the background. Thinking of scenes, can we just jump right to talk about the ending? Because it's fresh for us.
Absolutely.
I think this is a Baker hallmark, are the endings for almost all of his films. And these little saving grace notes where all of a sudden you realize, oh, this is now a Sean Baker movie because this happened. I think, as Adam mentioned, I finally took the time to see some of the earlier ones. And I think Takeout, which was not his debut, but the first that's available. Rough film, very good, but has an absolute grace note of an ending. And you can debate Anora. I think Anora has one as well. I think the Florida Project has one.
Absolutely.
Right, for sure. What's real, though, your comment about what's real, what's not, speaking of the Florida Project, that ending. But let's talk now about Tangerine. And it almost brings tears to my eyes, that ending, because of the precipice that we've been on, I think, as you very well described the beginning, and then where it leaves us. And that's the one I remember often among other scenes, but I forget how much time it gives to the other characters, Dinah and the cab driver too. He spreads it out, lets them sit in their lack of resolve, but then brings us to this, again, grace note of resolve. Doesn't solve everything, but resolve between the two main characters. So I'd like to hear a little bit about what you think about Sean Baker and endings in general, but particularly this one.
I mean, I think he's great at endings. I know some people don't. The Florida Project ending is divisive for some people. I think it's an incredible ending. I just bawled the first time I saw that. I also really like the Anora ending. I think I've had more conversations about it and kind of maybe about what some people I know have gotten stuck on there. But I think in this case in particular, I think to that question of what is real or not, the friendship, it affirms that this central friendship is real. In a world where these characters are all in really precarious situations and have very little that they can actually count on. And I think there is something really wonderful about the way that the movie does show these other two characters who, one of which is in just as precarious a situation, one of which is in slightly more stable, but that they are so deeply lonely and adrift, and that the two main characters, for all that they are have undergone some horrible things, do have something real in their connection and their willingness to be there for one another. And I think just that last shot of them together from the outside is just really beautiful and sweet and funny as well. The rapport is really the thing that this movie revolves around.
Yeah, it's real. The friendship is real because it is turbulent at times and it's flawed, and it should be, but there's also there's legitimate tenderness there. And we see that in multiple ways. I haven't seen this film since the show and since we gave it the golden brick. So this was quite an experience to revisit again. And I say experience very intentionally because, to your point, Josh, about the ending, I had forgotten how much time we spent with all of those other characters, and just as a ride that this movie takes you on. And it feels like it, right? His films are propulsive and they are manic at times, but there's that sense of controlled chaos. And just like with the home invasion scene in Anora, we get that version of that at Donut Time, right? And they're just adding the layers and layers. But then what happens after building to that? What is it? The last 5, 10 or more minutes, all of a sudden we just get to just exist with these characters. And if the movie tried to maintain that all the way to the end, it wouldn't be the film ultimately that it is.
You mentioned the look, which I think is also something, none of the three of us not having seen it more recently, I love to reprocess the cinematography, which was maybe the thing this movie was known for the most when it came out. Everyone seemed to talk about the use of a mobile phone attached a wide angle lens, right? Baker doing the cinematography with Radium Chung here. And yeah, 10 years on, it's obviously not as new, maybe as striking. I don't know that other films have mimicked it very much, but how does it sit now?
Well, it's funny, when Sean Baker at Sundance, I think was like, and by the way, this film was shot on iPhone, I think it was like iPhone 5, 5S around the time. It was like this surprise announcement and everyone gasped, and before that, there had been a few films that had been shot on iPhones, but it had been kind of a stunt, or some of them were sponsored, like
More self-conscious.
yeah, like there were some found footage horror films, which I think is like, kind of built into the format, or Park Chan-wook had done like a short that I think was sponsored by a mobile company. This is the first film that I can remember seeing that was shot on an iPhone in a way that the point was not that it was shot on an iPhone, right? Like he had always said that he did that for budgetary reasons. Right. The lens attachment was like something that a company had on Kickstarter. Like it was still, they were really just like starting out, but that's allowed it to kind of shoot in the kind of wider aspect ratio and the stabilizer, because otherwise, the iPhone is jittering around. But I think it looks great. I think that there is also something about, there's like a bit of familiarity, even with all of the kind of things they did to make the image more kind of cinematic. There is still like a bit of the familiarity to some things we're used to now that we're, constantly having little cameras that we're carrying around, that it looks both cinematic, but also has that kind of like immediacy, of something that like, of a look that we all have access to, that gives it, I think, a bit more mobility. It gives it a bit more immediacy. And I love the color. I think Sean Baker has said that he previously used to kind of drain some of the color out. And I think like with the idea that is the look of realism, right, is somehow it's like a little dingier. And in this, they kind of amped the colors up. It's like, it's got this really kind of amazing, richer, like saturated look. And I think that tendency in a lot of, not just movies, but the idea that like to capture and depict people who are in marginalized situations, like miserableism is the mode, right? Like that you kind of like have to treat it very seriously, which ends up kind of draining the characters of like joy, like any humor. And I think this film kind of is a great retort to that, while also treating their circumstances very seriously.
Did you at least give me a Christmas present?
Well, I mean, yeah, like our gift is like me running shit, like saving money, like cause I know you was getting out today. I was gonna surprise you. I was gonna take you to Roscoe's tomorrow for maybe like a nice Christmas dinner and shit. Like I thought that'd be special. What?
I feel you, but I got you one. I think you're gonna like it.
Actually, I was going to bring up Dinah again. I feel like for this entire Q&A, we should call her by the wrong name, like Dana, Denise, Desiree, which one is it? But it is Dinah. A perfect example of that, to support that, right, is that ending where she's actually miserable in that moment. And what do we get? We get the shot that echoes and makes the connection explicit between Radzik, which is the Christmas lights, and then the lights that are strung along the wall that she's walking on. That it doesn't make it glorious. It doesn't make it all of a sudden luxurious, or it elevates her experience, but it does not force us or allow us to like just wallow in it either, right? And it makes it beautiful in that moment.
Exactly. That's the needle that Baker's able to thread, at least for me, in all of these settings. And I think maybe Tangerine stood out so much and was a bit of a leap for him, because it kind of perfected something he was toying with. It's interesting that you say he's mentioned how previously maybe he drained color a little bit, and here it's bursting. So the needle he's threading, it's aesthetic and also philosophical. It's that these are seedy, rough places, but you turn the corner, and if the sun is hitting a donut sign the right way, there's beauty. And to your point, Adam, there is a way to shine that feels false. And there's a way to dinge it up that also feels false. That's the miserableism. So what Baker's able to do, and I think the cinematography here is key to that. The iPhone somehow is finding a way in between. So it has both enough of that reality, but then whether it's the eye of him, the other cinematographer, whether it's their eye catching things, or the color saturation, they're like, okay, but we also have this hint of beauty where you don't expect it. And I don't know many other filmmakers who are able to find that so consistently in their stories.
We can talk just about the pacing too a little bit more. The fact that every time the camera comes back to Cindy, we are in full on, it's following her, it's quick cuts, it's quick movements, right? But even when we do settle down for a second at the bus stop, the camera is still. It's a static shot, but there's nothing still about that moment, right? It's the little fidgets. We're hyper aware of everything that's the roller coaster that's going on in her mind. He wants us to pay more attention to what's going on in her head. The individual, personal, psychological experience, kind of emotional ride, I'll use that word again, that she's on in that moment, as opposed to the music amplifying it for us.
She's making a choice, it felt like to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that also. She's like, I choose chaos, right? like I'm going to commit to this full force.
And then the music follows her.
Exactly. Sean had said that when he first, was scripting the film, he said, like, don't budget for music. I'm not going to use any music. And the music the music he did end up using is so important to kind of just how the film moves from that the first time it kicks in. It just like, it does like kind of propel you along. But also I think like kind of classical music feeds into the idea of also like, this is a really richly cinematic treatment of these characters. Like these characters are not getting the kind of like pseudo documentary, like this. They are big main characters, and insist on being treated that way. Kind of like it, even when life kind of doesn't give them a lot of agency over their situation, And I think there is something about Cindy being like, I am going to choose this drama, and clearly something that she has done many times before. But because also there's a kind of like power to that and being like, this is the latest installment of my life. Yeah.
The car wash scene is another scene we do have to talk about. A memorable scene from this film, and we can get into why. But I do know, Alison, that you wrote an article at the time for BuzzFeed where you talked to Sean about this. It went into great detail about it. I'd love for you to share with the audience what your takeaways from that conversation were.
Yeah, I think what really strikes me about that scene is not even necessarily the car wash. So like the kind of mundane beauty of that, the kind of eroticism of it, the like just holding on for like the long shot, as the kind of car wash is going on. And then like the timing of it, whereas the guys come to kind of clean, they're like finishing up.
Yes,
is incredible. But what is always stuck with me is the lead up to that, where Alexandra is like, aren't you a sight for sore? Like, it's like so happy to see him. And I think that is something that I think Sean Baker is very good at, are these like, and I think without romanticizing it, are these like bits of like camaraderie that can come up when you're just
human
like
moments.
Yes, when you're like, these people have just spent time together, and like it may be very temporary, and you don't want to rely on it too much, but there is this kind of like warmth to it. And I think that it really emphasizes how small this world actually is, that they're all kind of moving in within this much larger Los Angeles ecosystem. And I think I'd mentioned this to you, but like there's a documentary called The Great Happiness Space. Has anyone seen it? It's like a 2006 documentary. I think unfortunately it's kind of hard to see right now. I think you can watch like a low res version on YouTube, which is not ideal. But it's a documentary about a host bar in Osaka, which is where all of the people who work there are men and the customers are women, who come in and pay a lot of money to basically spend time flirting with these guys and having a kind of pseudo boyfriend relationship with them. And it's something that it's a film he's brought up a lot. There's actually a BAFTA talk he did about it. You can find the transcript online and it's great. But I think kind of plays into a bit of that idea of like that nebulous space in between being like, this is a purely transactional relationship and this is like a real relationship, whatever that means. And I think that scene really emphasizes that the most, where you're like, these two people do have some genuine affection for one another. Also, like they are in this transactional kind of space.
It's real because think about what they've both just gone through. It isn't romanticized, to your point, because she's just gone through the drama of everything with Cindy that morning. And then with that trick that went wrong, horribly wrong. And for him, he's had the puke experience, right? And so for them to find the comfort in the expected, the transactional, as you said, like what they know they can count on, drama-free in that moment is something they're both looking for. And so they are a sight for sore eyes for each other.
One quick thing I noticed during the car wash scene this time, and which I do think in this film is the seedy beauty moment. That's where, just the abstract imagery on the windshield while that's going on. But I noticed this time there's so many references to Christmas throughout that maybe this is just how it happened, but the fabric of the car wash, they're all red and green.
Red and green and yellow.
And it was like all these Christmas colors like blending together while this is going on.
Yeah. And even just, I've used this term a lot already, talking about like sort of the roller coaster, but think about when the dryer starts and the whole thing is this buildup. It's almost like it is mundane. It's a car wash, and yet it feels like they're about to take off. It's a rocket ship ride in that moment, and we can maybe match that to what's actually happening there in that scene for at least one of the characters. So
let's stick on that character, that actor, Karen Karagulian. Karen, it's probably how you pronounce it.
So good.
He's amazing. Yeah.
Kind of Baker's secret weapon, like secret MVP in his cast. So he had a bit part in Takeout and then a bigger part in Starlet. And Honora, he's the family fixer, if you didn't recognize him, the stateside fixer. And that performance there captures something similar. What's here is like, you don't know what to make of this guy. You feel for him, but you also are like, oh, buddy, bad choice. In other instances, he has a roughness. And then in Prince of Broadway, where he runs a store, this really comes out, a gentleness that you don't expect. And yeah, somehow he helps Baker thread that needle with his performances. But yeah, what do you make of him here and in his other films?
Yeah, well, I think he's been in I think every, except for that first film, he's been in every one of Baker's films, and he definitely was not just didn't have just a big part in Honora. I think he helped he was there from the beginning. He was like the person around whom Sean Baker started building Honora initially. So which kind of speaks to how close their working relationship is. I just love how much also beyond just like the peeks into the Armenian community that we get through that character, that he often plays this character who has this home life and then another life, and there is this like divide, there is just a wall there. In Honora, I think you see him initially at like a baptism, right? and that gets called away to by his oligarch bosses to get a forceful divorce for their son. I love him as the embodiment of that character who has just like an expected home life and then this like totally different, other secret life, which I think is like certainly, as opposed to other characters who just live in this world altogether, I think it is representative of a lot of the ways in which these economies are propped up, right, by people who participate in them, but also don't kind of declare any ownership over them, right? It's by all of this money that is kind of never talked about. But I think he also just has such an amazing face, like he's so funny. He has this like incredibly, there are so many beats where his just reactions are just like funny unto themselves. And yeah, he can be a very warm presence. And I think, I mean, like him sitting by the Christmas tree at the end is just such a poignant image and such a sad, where you understand also how kind of like trapped he feels in this particular, in particular with like his mother-in-law in this home life, but also there is no kind of way he can reconcile, the kind of separate parts of his life.
And you have to trust your actor to give them a scene like that. It's wordless. The camera's on him the whole time. It's intercut with the other characters, so it's not like this sustained scene, but still, the way he underplays that is exactly what it needs.
Can we just talk about some other moments that are our favorites in this film, some other real striking moments of tenderness that I had forgotten about? When Alexandra finally does leave, walk away, I think it's leaving Nash's joint, and the way Baker holds on her, deliberating for quite a while. She's so intent on getting away from her. She certainly is justified in getting away from her. Like, she's been threatening it. She's finally going to make good on it. And then she gets to the corner, and while she does leave, the fact that she has to stop and think about it and even look back just tells you that how hard this is for her to leave her friend behind. And then later, again, I didn't remember this very well. I thought, oh man, when she finds out it's 7:08 and she's like, we're going. The whole mission all day long has been to confront Chester with Dinah. And just as she's on the verge of it, she realizes that she'll compromise her friend in her friendship in certain ways. They both will, but there are certain lines they won't cross. And she will not cross the line of missing this performance.
I also love the beat in the bathroom where she decides to do Dinah's makeup after having been like tugging this woman around by the hair for like half an hour. It's again like one of those moments where you're like, well, now they're not like best friends now or anything. You like the movie never oversells those beats, but like that moment of just tenderness there. I think also it emphasizes how much for Cindy kind of like keeping up this pace is a way to run away from herself and the kind of the things that she's trying not to think about with regard to Chester, with regard to just like a lot of factors in her life. And I think to see her be capable of also this moment of tenderness is really nice. I think I love the in Donut Time towards the end when how the allegiances shift depending on who shows up, like the looks people are exchanging. I love the look between Alexandra and Dinah when they're watching Cindy and Chester kiss, they just exchange this like, oh God. Like I think like there are so many wonderful beats like that where characters just have this moment of temporary like, can you believe this? Or just,
Yeah, and that's the same Sean Baker magic, I suppose, as we talk about the Honora scene, the memorable home invasion scene. It's that sense of controlled chaos where it seems like it is completely out of control, and yet all of those beats were so precisely planned, and how you balance that and still make it feel like it's all unfolding right in front of you, almost like a documentary, of course, with the handheld camera, right?
Yeah, and I think like something that he just has such an appreciation for the conversations that people have when they're killing time. I think even like what the cops are talking about, what seems to be like a weird date, right? With someone who...
Chester's talking about conspircy theories, right? Because what else are you going to talk about?
Exactly, right. You have a lot of times with people, whether, you're just like hanging out, and those are the things you wander around to. And I appreciate how much his movies like love those little beats of just being like, those little cul-de-sacs that the characters end up in.
I was surprised at the movie's willingness. I had forgotten its willingness to let Cindy be really mean, which I think is important. And it's part of that authenticity that we've been talking about, as when she, knocks the plate of food out of the Santa without a beard, his hands, I think people gasped, right, when she did that. And maybe that's because it was her first demonstration of something like cruelty. Maybe something came earlier, but, in line for food, the woman who says, I've been clean for 30 days, and she's like,
does not care.
Does not.
Yeah.
Like that. Like this is like the biggest moment in that woman's life, that like what she's going through, and it's just move along.
And Baker shows her pain. We see her reaction to it, right? And how important is that in that moment? Closing thoughts. Is there anything else about the film that you really want to share? And maybe a topic I'll throw out. I think we've answered it. I think we've answered it pretty well. But watching the film, I was thinking about this. The way we have talked about Sean Baker, the way many people who admire his work talk about him, and they do use those words like humanity and empathy and the authenticity, and the fact that he renders these characters in these situations. Josh, you expressed it very well, right? It's not about their circumstances, but he does it in a way that seems judgment-free. But like all the best filmmakers, there's a certain alchemy to it that I don't know. If someone came to you and said, well, I feel the same way about these subcultures or humanity as Sean Baker does, and I want to make those kinds of films, what's the formula? First of all, it's a silly question because there's no formula in art. But if we were going to try to answer it, what would you say? I think, again, we've talked about a lot of these things. I think for me, the biggest thing, number one on my list, might be just the fact that to capture these subcultures where maybe some people would look at them dismissively or judge them, and he finds not only beauty in them, but comedy in them. Seems to me maybe the most sort of transgressive or subversive part of it. But what about for you?
I think it's also that he is willing to be like, this is going to be guided by all of, like, including, everyone in the movie. This is not going to be like, this is my idea and this is how it's going to go, and you can be part of it if you want. But like he, when he went into this movie, he was like, I think they knew they wanted it to have an end with a big climax at donut time, and that the basic idea of like maybe like someone trying to track down who they thought their their boyfriend was like cheating on them with. But that's, everything else was built with the participation of their actors and with participation of people from the community. They did a lot of talking to people. Sean has done that for all of his movies. And I think that idea of being like, this is not my voice. I am the person guiding this, but it is built by the voices of the people I'm putting on screen is hugely important. But yeah, I think the comedy is big too. I think that idea that everyone's life is filled with, drama and comedy and kind of joy and despair, and that there is not like one, you shouldn't flatten them in order to kind of like in this effort to protect what you feel are their circumstances. And I think, I think it was, I can't remember which of the two leads said this, but apparently like when Sean had approached them, because neither had acted before in a film, about like making a movie, they had said, like, you have to promise that you'll show that it's brutal, like, and that also this is a real movie. It's going to be entertaining. You've got to make us laugh. And I think that those two things come through like perfectly and are both like really fair things to ask.
Merry Christmas Eve, bitch.
Were we supposed to share it?
Yes, we're supposed to share it, bitch. I'm broke. How have you been?
I've been great.
You probably got tips, bitch.
Bitch, the estrogen has been kicking in. The only thing that hasn't broken down was these arms. Everything else on my body looks good.
Oh, honey.
Girl, you try that. Look like the real thing.
So, I got some good news to tell you.
What?
I've been keeping a secret about me and Chester.
Girl. Woo! I know what it is.
Oh,
You're
girl.
breaking up with him. Thank God.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with the comedy point, and the co-authorship is key. And then the third thing I'd add is I don't sense that any of his movies aim to offer a solution, or even maybe assume that one is needed.
Yeah, exactly.
Perhaps that's it. And so yeah, that's different. He doesn't come in as a fixer of sorts.
Yeah, he's not prescriptivist. Yeah.
And just to wrap up on that point about co-authorship, my understanding is it's not just about saving money, shooting with iPhones because you have a limited budget, but making sure you're spending that money in a way that allows you to pay your cast, to pay for all the extras that you need in this film, to be able to shoot in certain locations. It's just reallocating that into the film itself. And if you can make an iPhone, look as good as he does, why not approach it that way? Alison Willmore, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thanks
really
for
insightful
me.
stuff. Thank you to everyone who came out to this first screening. 3 more. We'll see, hopefully, most of you back for Father Panjali. From March 1st at Filmspotting Fest, that was us in conversation with Vulture's Alison Willmore about Sean Baker's Tangerine. And Josh, I have to say, that was a highlight. There were so many highlights of Filmspotting Fest, but that conversation for me was really eye-opening. The screening was eye-opening because even though we both were high on this film and we did pick it because of our very favorable reaction to it that led to a Golden Brick win back in 2015, I hadn't seen it since awarding it the Golden Brick. Didn't have a chance with all the logistics going into Filmspotting Fest to rewatch it ahead of it, and really just fell under the spell of those characters, their relationship, and Baker's filmmaking. It all kind of came back to me, and honestly, I think I had an even stronger reaction to it this time around, really recognizing the achievement that Tangerine is. And then, of course, Alison just gets up there on stage with no notes in front of her at all and just starts pulling out wonderful insights about the movie.
Yeah. Brought a lot of great background. And, this is a comedy. And sometimes that can be easy to forget. I know when I first saw Tangerine, it was, I believe, on a year-end screener, or maybe it was a mid-year screener. But I distinctly remember watching it on my couch. It's a different experience to be in a packed theater where the farce of this story, it's not the only thing going on here, but the farce of the story plays out as Baker and his cast intended it. These are very funny characters, very funny performers, and what a delight to hear the audience responding to that.
Tangerine is currently streaming on Max and via VOD. If, like me, you haven't seen it in 10 years, highly recommend checking it out again.
Listening is the number one thing you can do to support an independently produced show like Filmspotting. There are a couple more things you can also do. You could take a minute to give us a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Doesn't matter if you're a first-time listener or you've been listening for all 20 years. Every new review helps us reach new listeners. Another way to support us, you can join the Filmspotting family at filmspottingfamily.com. We want to thank Family Plus member Josh Thayer, also known as the Forgetful Film Critic in Dallas. I've had a chance to meet Josh. Great guy. If you want to meet him, at least on Letterboxd, his handle is pretty simple, FFC.
And I love when things come together like this. I don't think Sam was aware of this when he picked Josh out of the family hat to feature during the segment this week. But just this past weekend, maybe just about 24 hours ago as we're recording this, I saw that over on his website, forgetfulfilmcritic.com, Josh had published a recap of his visit to Filmspotting Fest. He was there and he was a little shy and introverted and didn't want to bother us and didn't come up and introduce himself, but he's certainly a listener that we've been familiar with over the years. He has sent us some food that I mostly enjoyed that came to the Filmspotting P.O. box, Josh, if I remember correctly, and we've certainly featured his emails over the years.
And it's so funny that he did that for Filmspotting Fest. I didn't realize he did something quite similar. I met Josh at Ebert Interruptus when we did Jaws a couple of years ago, and he was kind enough to do a write-up of his experience there too. So yeah, thank you, Josh, for reporting back after all this stuff.
We will include a link to his recap over in our show notes. Josh says, I started listening to Filmspotting sometime around 2012-ish. I found it because at the time I had a mind-numbing and awful data entry job, so I was looking for movie-related podcasts that could anesthetize my drudgery. The Great Wolf of Wall Street Brawl of 2013 stands out vividly in my mind as an early favorite. It might have led to my decision to go back and start with Cinecast Episode 1. It took me 2 or 3 years to clear through the backlog. I'm a runner who has 2 full marathons and about a dozen half marathons under my belt, so those training runs helped me knock out a bunch of the old episodes. I'd listened to every episode, but I've fallen behind. At the moment, I'm stuck in May 2023. I'm hoping to be completely caught up by the end of this year. We wish you luck. Josh, a favorite review or segment. So this is one of those one for Josh, one for Adam bits, apparently. He says, top 5 manimals, baby.
Oh, yeah.
And then the top 5 tattoos we'd get was also pretty great. A review we got wrong. No such thing as a wrong opinion, but I strongly disagreed with Josh's take on Joker, and I'm in Josh's corner significantly more than I'm in Adam. So there again,
I
tit
lost
for
a
tat.
lot of people with that one.
His Letterboxd top 4. Koya, Niskatsi, Playtime, Sorry to Bother You, and David Lynch's Blue Velvet. He revisited a favorite recently, Heavy Metal, a movie that gets the rare sub 3-star rating and a heart on Letterboxd for me. See, I can't bring myself to do that.
So
if it doesn't get at least 3, if it gets 2.5,
no heart.
Can't give it the heart.
Can't give it the heart.
No.
Just can't.
Random film or filmmaker he loves, Vanya on 42nd Street. He credits The Shawshank Redemption as the movie that helped him to become a cinephile. A conventional answer, to be sure, but it's the movie that got me absolutely hooked. And finally, a book about movies or movie making. Wasn't familiar with this one. Now really eager to check it out. City of Nets by Otto Friedrich. Not a book necessarily about movies or movie making per se, but a portrait of Hollywood in the 1940s that is the best book about Hollywood I've ever read.
What a great title. City of Nets.
Yeah, our thanks to Josh once again for joining the family and for all of those years of listening while running. In addition to keeping us doing what we're doing, your support comes with perks. You get to listen early and ad-free. You get our weekly newsletter. You get to partake in exclusive opportunities like being part of the Filmspotting Family Discord. You get monthly bonus shows, including an April draft that will be coming with a Filmspotting listener. We'll see who that Filmspotting listener is based on how Filmspotting Madness plays out. You can learn more at filmspottingfamily.com.
Adam, when director Ryan Coogler teams up with Michael B. Jordan, we pay attention. This has been true since Fruitvale Station in 2013. Fantastic film they collaborated on. They went on to make Creed and Black Panther together. And now they have Sinners, which looks to be some sort of period thriller, possibly hints of horror. Michael B. Jordan in a double role, and Ryan Coogler directing. I am in. You could see Sinners for free with Regal Unlimited. Regal Unlimited is the all-you-can-watch movie subscription pass that pays for itself in just 2 visits. Right now, Regal is offering Filmspotting listeners endless movies for less. If you sign up for Regal Unlimited using code FilmSpot25, you'll get 10% off a 3-month subscription. Regal Unlimited is the only truly limitless movie subscription pass. You can see any standard 2D movie anytime. There are no blackout dates. There are no restrictions. Also with Regal Unlimited, you won't just save money on tickets. You also save on snacks. Members get 10% off all non-alcoholic concessions. Sign up now in the Regal app or at the link in the description and use code FILMSPOT25 to receive your discount.
Spring is here, and you can now get almost anything you need for your sunny days delivered with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Well, you can't get a well-groomed lawn delivered, but you can get a chicken parmesan delivered. A cabana? That's a no. But a banana? That's a yes. A nice tan? Sorry, nope. But a box fan? Happily, yes. A day of sunshine? No. A box of fine wines? Yes. Uber Eats can definitely get you that. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now. Alcohol in select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details.
With all the things that I've seen, I ain't ever seen no demons, no ghosts, no magic. Till now.
That's from the trailer for Ryan Coogler's Sinners, which comes to theaters this weekend. It's set in the Jim Crow era South. Michael B. Jordan plays twin brothers who return home to find a supernatural evil awaiting them. We are going to talk about this next week on the show, but what's the rumpus? Have you heard any good buzz about Sinners so far?
I mean, you know I avoid reviews, but it was hard to avoid the parade of star ratings on Letterboxd after some early press screenings for this. And I'm going to have to put my head in the sand for a little while longer. Couldn't make a press screening of it myself, so we'll have to catch up with it on opening weekend. But yeah, seems to be fairly well received so far.
Okay. That's good to know. I hadn't seen that parade of star ratings yet. I did see the trailer for the first time in full before catching the Battle of Wallis Island this weekend, and certainly I'm intrigued. Also, next week, our Tarkovsky Marathon will continue with 1966's Andrei Rublev. Josh, it's only about twice as long as both of the movies we watched this week. Are you prepared?
This is true. I am prepared.
You already saw it, though. You saw it on the big screen.
I couldn't resist. Yeah, University of Chicago's Doc Films, I think it was in January, had it showing one weekend. And I was just like, especially knowing how daunting Tarkovsky can be, I was like, at least let me get a head start on this one on the big screen. But I will absolutely be giving it another look before we have our conversation.
It will also be the Filmspotting Madness Final. Our Final Four will be down to just 2. And yes, you can vote in that Final Four now, filmspotting.net/madness.
I did want to give a quick thanks, Adam, to the folks who came, the listeners who showed up for our Boulder meetup last week at the end of Ebert Interruptus out there. I was still recovering, shall I say. I was on the other side, but I wasn't about to shut the place down with listeners this year. I was able to buy the first round. You'll be happy to hear. So look for that.
Oh, I saw the bill. Yeah.
Look for that on the credit card.
Manageable.
And hey, it was a respectful group. It always is out in Boulder. I mean, it's nice having done this so many years now to, catch up with like Bob, Scott, Eric. I think they've been coming for a number of years. Carly and Stu also I've seen there before. Josh and Jaden. Yep. I think they were there possibly last year or the year before, and then got to meet some new folks. So Ryan, Christina, Andrea. We were able to get in some good conversation before I had to leave. I tried to survey them about, what they'd like to see improved on the show, and really no complaints. Nothing to report back to. They did say that they would like to have Filmspotting Fest every year. Yeah. I know we've been talking about that primarily for their own convenience, they admitted, because not because they would come every year, but that increases the chances it would work out for me. So
got it.
Yeah. But yeah, thanks to all those folks who showed up. Always fun to do meetups. I'm going to throw this out there. It's kind of crazy in terms of meetups, but
you're trying to one up me.
Just thinking. We do like to see how far flung our meetups can be.
That's right.
And I thought I might be able to have the record when I did an Oslo meetup a number of years ago. And you smugly informed me, well, before you joined the show, I once had a meetup in Helsinki.
That's right.
If you do your geography, yes, Helsinki is further away.
Oh, I was just Google mapping that because I have no idea.
I'm pretty sure you checked that. And
I'm not good with geography.
Just picturing the map, I'm pretty sure that tracks. I'm going to try to one-up you, Adam, in May.
Okay.
If there is a Film Spotting listener or listeners, really all it takes is one, in Tokyo. Debbie and I are heading out to Japan for a 30th anniversary trip, and we will be in Tokyo May 22, May 23, May 24. None of those dates are actual anniversaries. So Debbie said, yeah, sure. It was fun in Oslo, me hanging out with you and the boys. So we'll do another one in Tokyo if you can pull it off. So if you know of anyone in Tokyo, if we have listeners there, that'd be kind of cool. And it'd be great to at least meet up. So let us know. Feedback at filmspotting.net.
I can confirm that we have downloads annually, more than just a few dozen, Josh, in Japan. So hopefully this pans out. Yeah, I would love to have you beat my record here. I hope the Tokyo meetup goes through. Speaking of festivals in Chicago, and ones that we're at least tangentially involved with, the Chicago Critics Film Festival kicks off here on May 2nd. Runs May 2nd through the 8th. I believe all the movies are playing at the Music Box. We'll get into this a little bit more and have some more details for you next week on the show, but definitely wanted to make sure that our audience, especially those of you who are in Chicago or are nearby and can make it, that you're aware of this fest. ChicagoCriticsFilmFestival.com is where you can learn more and buy tickets. Tickets are available now. One movie that I want to single out, and when I say the title, it may sound familiar, Josh, and listeners may recall me bringing this up back in January. The Zodiac Killer Project, a movie that played at Sundance and won an award there, and that I saw virtually via Sundance Online and really went for, that is playing at the Chicago Critics Film Festival. So a chance to see Zodiac Killer Project on the big screen as part of that fest. Do recommend you see it if you can. Again, that's ChicagoCriticsFilmFestival.com.
One last bit of business here is to note what they're up to on our sister podcast, The Next Picture Show, looking at cinema's present via its past. They have a new pairing. They're going to look at David Cronenberg's new film, The Shrouds, which comes to Chicago and elsewhere next weekend, alongside another Cronenberg film, probably my favorite Cronenberg film, actually, The Fly from '86 with Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis. New episodes of The Next Picture Show drop every Tuesday, and you can find them wherever you get your podcasts.
This is blasphemy. This is madness.
This is absolute madness.
This is madness. Madness. Hey, this madness.
But this is absolute madness, Ambassador. Why should you build such a thing?
Madness. This is Sparta!
Time for Filmspotting Madness, our annual bracket-style movie elimination tournament. 64 films, only one can survive, and this year we are doing the best films of the 21st century so far. We've got your Elite 8 results and the Final 4 matchups. As we noted last week, the Elite 8 ended up being the Elite 8, the top 8 seeds in the tournament. So 1 was going against 8, 2 against 7, 3 versus 6, and so on. The results, Josh, we had 2 blowouts. We had 2 very, very close matchups, including one that was technically an upset. Let's start with the largest to smallest margin. We'll go in that order. That number 1 seed, There Will Be Blood, Paul Thomas Anderson, going up against David Fincher's The Social Network. There was blood, indeed, because PTA took it with 72% over The Social Network.
Does that divide surprise you? I hear from so many people who just love The Social Network, and maybe
higher than I thought, a bigger margin for sure.
Bigger margin than you thought. Yeah, me too, for sure. All right, let's look what we have next. It's David Lynch's Mulholland Drive, which was a number 2 seed, versus Wong Kar-wai's In the Mood for Love, seated at number 7. Mulholland, another fairly decisive win, 64% to 36%. This also surprises me.
So here's where we get that technical upset. The number 4 seed, Mad Max Fury Road from George Miller, versus No Country for Old Men, the Coen brothers, 4 versus 5. And No Country takes it, much closer than the other two, Josh, but No Country advances 53 to 47%.
Yeah, and that was a tight one. Even I'm trying to remember what I did predict, because I remember Fury Road doing so well in a previous Madness, and yet the Coen brothers usually, when it comes to any sort of film spotting poll, you bet on the Coen brothers. So which way to go on this? Not surprised at all that it was this close with No Country for the Win. All right, our last pairing, Michel Gondry's Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, seated at number 3, versus Bong Joon-ho's 6th seed, Parasite. Sounds like this one started out very close, stayed close, back and forth. You and Sam were probably refreshing,
hitting refresh all
the time, just not getting anything else done.
That's what we do.
And man, did this end up close. 51% for Sunshine over Parasite?
Yes.
What?
Michel Gondry.
What?
Moves on. Parasite is out, Josh. And this is 51 and 49 rounding up. So it was even tighter than that sounds. And I think there were times where maybe these were separated by only 10 to 15 votes.
Oh, man. I think we'll get to this, but I think this blew up my bracket.
Yeah, it might. It certainly didn't help your bracket. We will get to that in a moment. So the final four is set. Matchup number 1, Manifest Destiny, the Battle of 07. There Will Be Blood, the number 1 seed, up against the Coen brothers, No Country for Old Men, the number 5 seed. And if we do go back to Madness history, you think you would be able to predict how this would come out, because in 2019, we did the best of the 2000s. Now, real quick, the next year, 2020, we did the best of the 2010s. Parasite won that.
Yeah.
With the runner-up being Mad Max Fury Road. In 2019, best films from 2000 to 2009. Listen to how it came out, Josh. You know that There Will Be Blood won. The runner-up was Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. The third place finisher was No Country for Old Men.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I had looked at those in trying to make my predictions. I think clearly I weighted Parasite's win over Eternal Sunshine's impressive placement. Yeah. Yeah.
Here we are, though. We've got that Battle of 07, and we've got matchup number 2, Dream Logic, Josh.
Yeah. Mulholland Drive, which was a number 2 seed, versus Eternal Sunshine, which was seeded number 3. But now I'm thinking there's surprising power behind Eternal Sunshine, at least for me.
And there could be a few different factors at play, including, we noted back at the very beginning, we talked about it when we did the seeding, David Lynch's passing.
Yep. Had to factor that in.
Mulholland Drive is a masterpiece in my mind, and it could stand on its own separate from that. But yes, I agree. That has to be something that is at least playing a small part. And if you go back to that 2019 Madness, Eternal Sunshine crushed Mulholland Drive, 61 to 39% in the Elite 8.
Oh, wow.
We will see how things have changed.
So yeah,
what's going on in the voters' minds this year as those two.
Even if you factor in some recency, that's a big gap. Interesting.
It is. Yep. Now, as we are talking this very moment, there's only a few hundred votes in, but I've hit refresh a few times and they're both pretty tight, Josh. So separation certainly could occur. This is day one.
Right.
But I think we could see something a lot closer than that 61 to 39 back in 2019. It's going to be fun. You can vote in those Madness Final Four polls right now. They close Tuesday, April 22nd. So Tuesday, April 22nd at 5 p.m. Central Time. All the information you need is at filmspotting.net/madness. For those of you who submitted brackets, if you were one of the 825 participants who did submit a prediction in our bracket contest, we do encourage you to go to the Madness homepage, click on the bracket, check out how you are doing. The top of the leaderboard, Josh, seems to be at least 2/3 international, at least based on email addresses.
Okay.
And for the third week in a row, it's UK's Ricky, don't lose that number 1 spot, Kendall. He was perfect in the Elite 8, Josh, and remains almost perfect for the tournament. He has missed only one matchup, and he very well could only miss one matchup the entire tournament. I don't know how he's doing it.
At this point, Ricky, you need to employ these gifts towards something that will get you fame and fortune. They're being wasted here.
Well, and you may not recall this, Josh, but I just looked at his bracket. The only one he missed was he picked The Dark Knight to beat Children of Men. And do you know how close that one was? That was 52-48.
Yeah.
So, he was close even in defeat. Congrats, Ricky, so far. It is your tournament to lose. In second place, I'm really excited to see not a new name to us, but a new name near the top of the leaderboard, Steve Mesa. He has also done very well so far. He's made 56 correct choices. He has Mulholland and There Will Be Blood in the final. And I believe, unlike Ricky, he has Mulholland Drive winning it. Ricky has the number 1 seed, There Will Be Blood. And then in third place, representing Italy, Maria, Quantum Physics is Easier Than This, Marcassini, has the correct final four. Maria has 54 correct choices so far. She has There Will Be Blood up against Eternal Sunshine.
Okay.
Competing for the championship, Josh.
She's
so
got
congrats.
a shot.
Yeah, congrats to all three of them so far. The internal standings, our internal bracket contest. Me, you, Sam, Mike Merrigan. Josh, you got
What did Parasite
three.
cost me?
Yeah, you got 3 of those 4 matchups correct in the Elite Eight. You are in 4th place. You're 80th overall. You did have Parasite beating Sunshine. You had it advancing all the way to the final.
Yeah. Ouch.
Sam has dropped or possibly remains in 3rd place. He also had 3 of 4 correct. He had Mad Max over No Country for Old Men. That was his one misstep. He's in 61st overall. My misstep, yeah, I picked Parasite over Eternal Sunshine. That has me in 47th overall. And finally, Mike Merrigan is in 1st place. Here's Mike's issue, though. He had Parasite over Sunshine and had it advancing to the final.
I think I did too. So yeah.
You did. You both have Parasite going on to that championship match. Sam and I have different winners. He went with There Will Be Blood. I went with Mulholland Drive. Methinks Sam may be in the driver's seat in our competition.
Here's my usual important question. At this point, is there a chance I won't be in last?
I believe there is. I have not crunched the numbers.
With
but
Mike also choosing Parasite.
Yeah, here's the thing. With you picking and Mike picking There Will Be Blood and Sam, you all pick There Will Be Blood. I'm the only person who picked Mulholland Drive to win it all. So if There Will Be Blood wins, I have to think I'm going to finish last.
Okay. Voters, you know what to do.
I knew that was going to be a risk when I chose it, but it just felt too boring to go.
Yeah, no, it's a bold strategy.
There Will Be Blood again.
It's a bold and not, I considered it. I definitely considered it. It's a reasonably bold strategy. I will say that.
We can't wait to get your votes and share the winners next week on the show, filmspotting.net/madness.
So good, so good, so good.
Great gifts for mom? We've got them. And they're up to 60% off at Nordstrom Rack stores now.
You know they have Marc Jacobs?
Gotta show mom some love.
That is so good.
Snag amazing deals on Mother's Day gifts from Barefoot Dreams, Kate Spade New York, and more. Great brands, great prices. That's why you rack.
Ну чё молчишь? Откуда взялся?
Я Бондарев. Сообщите в штаб 51-му, что я нахожусь здесь у вас.
А кто такой 51-й? Тебе какой штаб-то нужен? Какой армии?
Полевая почта ВЧ-49 550.
20 years of podcasting, Josh, also means 20 years of Filmspotting Madness. With that clip from Andrei Tarkovsky's Ivan's Childhood, we embark on our 51st marathons. These are all about eliminating our cinematic blind spots, whether they be the work of certain filmmakers that we're not as familiar with as we would like to be, or not familiar at all, or certain genres or regions of cinema. We have occasionally been able to knock out a director's complete filmography with a single marathon, usually containing 5 or 6 films, though it's rare. That's effectively what we're going to be able to do here with our Tarkovsky blind spots, though we're not watching all of his feature films. By the end of this marathon, we will have seen them all.
Yeah, and I think I had said at one point last year as an aside, I don't know how it came up, but I just can't imagine going through this life without having watched every feature film from Andrei Tarkovsky. And so thankfully, I'm going to take care of that here with this marathon. Very excited to embark here. We're able to do this because the Russian filmmaker, he made only 7 features between 1961 and his death in 1986. So although a lot of these are long, it's still a manageable filmography to tackle. And as you said, Adam, between the two of us, we've seen most of these already, but also between the two of us, there are some gaps. So we do want to mention the Tarkovskys that are not going to be part of this marathon. And these are some great films. Solaris, we have both seen that one. I think, Adam, it was part of an overlooked auteurs marathon you did before my time.
Way back in 06 with Sam, yes.
Okay. 1975's Mirror, we did discuss together. That was part of a marathon in 2023. It was our Sight and Sound Top 100 blind spots. So looking at that list and, picking a handful of movies from it that were blind spots for the both of us, Mirror was our selection there. And then Tarkovsky's final film, 1986's The Sacrifice. We have both seen that. We haven't had a discussion about it. No. I'm not sure. I know I saw it within the last maybe 5 to 8 years. Perhaps we did our top 5 films of 1986, and that's why we caught up with it.
Yeah, it might have been homework for you. I think I saw it originally a few years before that, back in 2014 when I was preparing. I didn't end up putting it on the syllabus, though. I think we watched scenes from it. It was part of my Graham School class at the University of Chicago, Spiritual Crises in Cinema. So that,
of course,
was the reason why I did that homework.
Yeah, perfect title for that. And so, yeah, those are the 3 that we both have already seen. So here are the films we're going to be covering in this current marathon. 1962's Andrei Rublev. That is a blind spot for me. Did, as I mentioned, just see it for the first time about a month or 2 ago. But yeah, in preparation really for this marathon. And we will be discussing Andrei Rublev next week. After that, we'll move on to Stalker. This was the first Tarkovsky I ever saw. It is a blind spot for Adam. That one came out in 1979. Another Adam blind spot is Nostalgia from 1983. And if you want to play along with us on this marathon, all but Nostalgia are streaming on the Criterion Channel and Max, and all of them plus Nostalgia are available via VOD.
We're starting with 1961's The Steamroller and the Violin, and Ivan's Childhood, Tarkovsky's first proper feature, which came out a year later in 62. Steamroller is not a metaphor, or at least not entirely a metaphor. The 45-minute student film features a young boy of 7 who's a dedicated violinist. He's teased and bullied by his peers in the neighborhood. He befriends a steamroller driver. Spoilers, no violins were harmed in the making of this film, Josh. With Ivan again, we have a boy befriending an older man, in this case, a few older men. It's 12-year-old orphan Ivan, who is a scout for the Soviet army in World War II. He's looked after by 3 young officers. And I went back, Josh, found my notes from that early Filmspotting Marathon, the Overlooked Auteurs Marathon, though then it was Cinecast with Sam. And I love that I posed this question to him in these terms. I said, would you agree that in the history of Cinecast, we've never been more humbled or challenged by a filmmaker than we were with these 2 films, the 2 films being Solaris and, at the time, Andrei Rublev. But that sets up for you what it felt like then, and even a little bit now, how formidable Tarkovsky's filmography feels. Of course, the funny part is the history of Cinecast when we were 80 shows in. Compared to now, when we have a few more shows under our belt, we'll see if that pays off.
You'd probably say the same thing.
Yeah, no, I absolutely would. And I share that because I want you to contextualize having seen other Tarkovsky films and already revering him as a filmmaker and going back now to the beginning, to the very beginning of his career, and seeing or not seeing how some of his motifs, some of his obsessions, some of those thematic ideas may have been explored, or he was starting to explore them even in this early work. And since they did come out within just 1 year of each other, how did you see that student film and the work he was doing there, the experimentation he was doing there, come to fruition perhaps in his first feature?
Yeah, and I say you'd probably ask the same question now, because I don't think we'll ever get to the bottom of a Tarkovsky film or figure out Tarkovsky, right? And I think that's a good thing, because his movies are about the mystery of mystery. They're not, they can be puzzles in many ways, but the point isn't necessarily to figure them out. It's to experience mystery. At the same time, that can be daunting. And I really hope that people are going to play along with this marathon and start here with us if they've never seen a Tarkovsky film and only have him as this imposing figure in their minds, because the Steamroller and the Violin is a lovely little fable that is so involving and approachable. And we're going to touch on a few of those things you were asking about where you see that, yes, Tarkovsky made this. But I just have to think, if you're at all intimidated by him, open up this little children's book and sit with it. And I like to think it'll envelop you in a way and make you ready to take the next step, which Ivan's Childhood is, for sure. I think it's also a not step yet towards where Tarkovsky will eventually take you, but you can see more signs of where you're going. But it is a conventional war film in some ways that is more approachable. So yeah, this isn't a completist Tarkovsky marathon, but I really hope listeners join us if they're new to Tarkovsky and start here. Ivan's Childhood is the more impressive accomplishment. Absolutely. It's more interesting. You see more of Tarkovsky in it, but I kind of treasured the Steamroller and the Violin. I absolutely loved this experience. It is, as I said, a little fable, but I think it's profound. I think it's full of real feeling. Just this simple story of this bullied kid, the musician. There goes the musician. Kids say, go get him.
With disdain.
With disdain. Exactly.
I love it. It's an insult, musician.
That's it. And to me, this movie was about breaking down the lines between someone who's interested in art and someone who is a laborer. And that the laborer can appreciate art and that the artist can appreciate the work of the laborer. And, you know, when this kid played by Igor Fomchenko has this friendship with, how about this actor playing the Steamroller driver, Vladimir Zamansky, just the warmth and the instant recognition that this kid is being bullied and that he's going to take him under his wing and let him drive the Steamroller so that all the other kids in the neighborhood are jealous, take him to lunch. And again, it's the simplest of ideas, but it is executed with imagination and tenderness and care and artistic invention. I think we'll get to that points to other things we see in Tarkovsky later. And I'm sure there are things, you know, related to the time and period I'm not picking up on in terms of the Soviet era. And is this trying to meet government expectations for praising the worker? But at the same time, it's also making space for appreciating the artist and vice versa. So yeah, this is like 45 minutes and it's just beautiful.
It is. Yeah. And I know this is probably going to sound like one of the daddest things I've ever said, but that's fine. I'll play the part. Maybe it's because The Masters was on last weekend, but one of my favorite phrases is I love when golf commentators talk about some golfers as great ball strikers. He's one of our great ball strikers, Josh. Well, my film critic version of that is when you think about the all-time image makers in cinema, where does Tarkovsky rank? And even if you were just going off of these two films, quite honestly, you wouldn't even need the rest of it, even though that just solidifies the case for him being perhaps number one or certainly in a top five, right? And to your point about the worker and even with a war film, I do know that at the end of the 50s and early 60s in Soviet cinema, it was very common to make war films. They were still definitely reckoning with their involvement in the war and the fallout from it and its effect on society and culture. But some of them were more likely to be a bit propagandistic and pro-military, certainly pro-Soviet. And you watch something like Steamroller and the Violin, and you can see those elements of it being very pro-worker. But you take these films in their totalities, and you also recognize that Tarkovsky is someone, to your point about making mysteries about mystery, he's just so disinclined to project something so simple and boring on screen. And he subverts those elements every chance that he gets, but not in a way where it feels like he's trying to thumb his nose at anyone. His cinema is not predicated on responding to anybody else or to the government. At least it doesn't feel that way to me. These are these reveries that come out of his imagination. And I'll try to unite these two thoughts, talking about the image making and the way he takes the everyday and just breathes all this imagination into it. The moment for me, I wonder if you had a moment like this. I'm sure you had at least one in Steamroller and the Violin. The moment for me that really kind of took my breath away was when we see the young boy play the violin for the first time at his lesson. And he starts to play the notes, and you can tell that the music is something that he really values and is important to him, and he feels the beauty of it. And he starts kind of swaying with the music a little bit. But then what does Tarkovsky do with the camera as he's swaying to represent what it means for this boy to play this music, to represent what it's doing to him emotionally and intellectually even. He doesn't just leave the camera on him. He then pans over to the page of notes, and the notes become a little bit blurry. And then from that, Josh, he goes over to the table where there's a glass with water and light coming in through the window, and the light is bouncing inside the glass of water, again, creating this blurry effect. And it's only brought suddenly back into focus. We're only shook back into reality along with the boy, because the teacher has decided this isn't acceptable.
Yeah.
Right? Which is a metaphor for other larger issues within society, including this idea of being a musician, of being an artist, and how important is that really to the larger cause. But this is Tarkovsky doing what he does so well throughout all the films of his that I've seen, and I look forward to seeing more of these moments, discovering some new ones, rediscovering some as we go, visually portraying the ineffable. That's what it is. How do you describe it? I'm not going to try to describe it. I don't need to. You have to watch what he does with the camera, and you understand exactly what he is feeling. It reminded me of one of my favorite moments from Mir when we talked about that, which was that kind of magical, imaginative moment where the young boy in that film sees a woman sitting at a table and then she disappears. We're not sure if she was ever actually there. When he goes to the table, we think it might be in his imagination, but then we see that there's some condensation from her mug still on the table. So we have Tarkovsky using water again, which he uses throughout both films, and he's going to use throughout these films. We have him utilizing even the water within a mug, or the effects of the liquid being in the mug, and it being something that you cannot quite grasp. And yet as a viewer, because of the way he portrays it, you do understand it, you do feel it.
Yeah, capturing the ineffable is exactly right. And water, it's so fitting that you start with that observation about a glass of water, because he so frequently uses it to stand in for that experience, because water can shapeshift, it can distort light, it can just take on so many meanings.
Right.
And I'll point to another use of it in the Steamroller and the Violin. This is when they're having lunch together. They're like in an outdoor corridor or sort of an alley. And I love, again, the exchange, the exchange between labor and art. Here, you have the kid struggling. We should note, if we haven't already, he's about 7, to give people an idea of how old this kid is. Taking out the loaf of bread that the driver has for lunch and taking the knife and just kind of like, he's going to slice his thumb off. He has no idea what he's doing. And the driver kindly shows him, here's how you slice with a knife in a way that's safe and effective. And it's just one of these sort of maturing moments. Like, this will help you become more of a grown-up, to show you how to do this. And what's the kid's response? It's not indirect response, but it is the next thing we see, is he begins to explain, well, here's how a violin works. I think the driver might ask him, what's that part of your violin? And then, the kid proceeds to pluck a few chords. And he notices that, oh, well, where I'm standing in this corridor, the resonance. He starts to explain to the driver what resonance is.
Yes.
This is not a good spot for resonance. And then he goes to another spot and plucks. And then when he finds a good spot for the appropriate resonance, he plays a little bit. And the drivers just smile, not only at the beauty of the art he's enjoying, but what he has learned from this boy in that moment. And here's where the water comes in. Throughout these scenes, there are puddles all over the place on these streets, you know? And you have to think Tarkovsky is, the production design is employing those for various purposes. And here, even in this corridor, there is a puddle and it begins reflecting the light of the sun on their faces. And it's just blessing them in this moment. It's transforming the space. It's somehow making this interaction, which was already significant, gives it a level of holiness. And this is what Tarkovsky uses water and light throughout his films to do in so many instances. So yeah, just totally makes sense that we're already talking about water.
Yeah, the young boy is named Sasha. And how about that moment, again, talking about this dichotomy and the reverence that Tarkovsky and this film has? It's not necessarily a subtle film. The reverence it is expressing for those who are artistically inclined, recognizing that this type of beauty matters in this world. Those boys, all those neighborhood kids that can't wait to beat up on him and who do insult him with the term musician, when they finally open the violin and they finally see it, they behold it. They behold it as something that they, even though they don't understand really what he does with it or why he does what he does with it, there's something about the beauty of just the object itself that stops them in their tracks.
Yeah, it's like, that's what I wanted to ask you. If that was your impression, is that it almost mesmerizes them.
Yeah.
Because the camera starts to do something too, where it's almost changes focus, as you were describing before. The soundtrack becomes a little ethereal, and it's almost like the violin casts a spell on them so they don't destroy it. Because you think for sure they're just going to smash this thing to bits.
Right. It would only make sense. But in this movie, that violin is going to have a certain sort of magical hold on them. Again, even if they're ignorant ultimately to its charms. You watch Steamroller and Violin, you definitely do sense that it's a student film, though as I said earlier, I've seen a lot of student films in my day and none of them looked like this movie or were as vividly colorful as this film.
Colors are so great.
Yeah, it has that kind of Ziga Vertov man with a movie camera trying out every single technique I can possibly employ. And he uses them well and very inventively, but it was his final project to earn his thesis or to earn his degree. And it feels like he's showing off a little bit. Look what I can do. I do know how to use all of these different visual techniques. It coalesces a little bit more, I think, in Ivan's childhood, but then it's so stunning to go right from one into the other, which I did a day apart, but having that color in my mind and then seeing the stark black and white and how it's used and how shadows are used, especially in Ivan's childhood. Even there's the juxtaposition though. How about the beginning, which we don't know at first is a dream sequence? We start to realize something might be a little bit off. In fact, it seems just a little bit too bright in the sun. Things seem a little bit too idealistic. And then that jolt into reality. This is a dream sequence, a bit of a nightmare, but a dream sequence for Ivan. And now we're in the reality as we're approaching nighttime. And here the shadows are especially harsh. That glow of the sunlight of him with his mother is certainly gone. Josh, there's a moment, though, in Ivan's childhood when I know we use phrases like this. We say it took my breath away, like I said earlier, or it stunned me. There is a scene. I won't say that I gasped out loud, but I did just sort of sit there with my jaw almost on the floor watching it. And when I say that, do you imagine you know which scene I'm talking about in this film?
Because there's
the
so compositions are pristine throughout. And this changes, that Edenic opening that you mentioned, the dream sequence is a little looser. It's, Ivan is running in a lot of these scenes. And at one point he imagines he's flying, right? And the camera sort of mimics this from his point of view in a wonderful way. And then when we cut to reality, to this World War II setting, where we find he is an orphan, essentially working for Russian soldiers as a scout, as a spy on the front lines, the German front lines, then it becomes more stark. But that's when the compositions take over. And it's like, whether it's Ivan just in the foreground with a windmill way off on a ridge behind him, there's almost not a shot that isn't masterfully composed. So,
Yes.
so yeah, it's hard to pick which one it might have been.
Well, I'm going to give it to you. And before I say it, I'll give you a couple other options, or at least one other option. And that's the second, I think, dream sequence where he's with his mother and they're looking down into the well. Here again,
Oh,
water.
yeah. Yeah.
And the refraction of light and how images change and that literal fluidity. The fact that when they look down into the well, the camera is down in the well and they are looking directly into it and staring right back at us. It's as if it's a portal. The well becomes a portal into his psyche. It becomes a portal into his unconscious in a way that so many films have tried to do and have done effectively. I don't know if any have done it as effectively as this movie does, but the jaw-dropping moment for me, Josh, is during a sequence that features the lieutenant character, Colin, I believe is what they call him, and Masha, who is the nurse at this
the birch forest
location. The birch forest.
Oh my gosh.
So both of these films up to this point, Steamroller and the first 30, 40 minutes, if you will, of Ivan's childhood, these are films that are very much to me, Josh, about Tarkovsky exploring this idea of looking for or exploring the possibility of beauty in a world that is defined by brutality. And I think this sequence so perfectly captures that, and also gets back to what we were saying about the ineffable. This is a sequence where the lieutenant character is being a bit of a predator, fair to say. I don't know if he's being a bit of a predator.
Oh, yeah.
This is a man, fair to say, has probably not seen too many attractive women or women of any kind on the front line. He manages to get her out in this birch forest, and he seems to be very set in having some kind of encounter with her. He is saying things in a playful way, sometimes in an aggressive way. There's certainly a sense of innuendo, and he is kind of stalking her, and she feels uncomfortable. She feels uneasy and is constantly moving away from him, and without openly rejecting him, is constantly trying to maneuver out of certain situations where they may be intimate with each other. And Josh, all of a sudden, there is this crevice, there is this hole in the ground that she needs to get over, and he says he'll help her. She says no. He grabs her anyway. After first straddling the crevice, he grabs her as if he's just going to kind of carry her across. He's almost acting like a bridge, and he's going to carry her to the other side. Except what does he do? He grabs her and suspends her in midair as Tarkovsky's camera then sinks into the crevice and shoots up at the low angle at them. And it becomes this almost angelic moment. It could be obscene because it's him forcing a kiss onto her. It is him forcing a physical moment. And yet the way he lifts her, the way he suspends her there, it somehow goes from obscenity into grace. And I don't know that it transforms into grace. I'm saying it is containing those two ideas simultaneously. And I think that for me is this idea too of beauty mixed with brutality. And that's a moment that's certainly going to be a contender. I know we have so much ahead of us here in this marathon. That's going to be a contender for the scene of this marathon. It's going to be a contender for my favorite scene or my favorite shot of this marathon. And it surprised me in every way it possibly could within that sequence.
Yeah, it's a very curious sequence because I think Masha, who is the nurse character played by Valentina Malyavina, I think this is one of two, maybe three scenes she gets. So she's a relatively minor character and she's given significant scenes. I think this is, it's to Tarkovsky's credit that he's interested in a woman character's experience in this time and place and takes the time to include it. And then the older soldier who you've been describing, Colin, played by Valentin Zubkov, you're right. It's this dance but it is a dangerous situation. She, as I read it, she is trying to find a way to extricate herself without making it clear that she's in danger. It's that horrible sort of dance that women likely have to do in these situations where how can I keep this playful enough to get away without it turning in a violent manner?
Right.
And so there's a lot of danger there is how I read it. And I think that's how Tarkovsky meant it to be communicated. The younger lieutenant we've met earlier, Galtsev, who is the official supervisor of Masha. He knows she's out there. And so we also know he's coming to sort of rescue her. So that's at play too.
He runs. Once that other soldier turns away, he stops walking and starts running.
Because he realizes she might. So it's a very fraught situation that I guess I'm just saying I need to give more thought because it stands very much apart from the rest of the film. And I don't know that that's a bad thing, but it doesn't involve Ivan at all. Right?
No.
The boy at all. But the setting, Adam, the setting of these birch trees are, again, the black and white. These are like, I keep saying birch, maybe they're aspens. If you think of like in Colorado, aspen trees have this kind of bark, the peely white bark, and trees made to be shot in black and white, right? Because they just glow on the screen. And I think it's in Miller's Crossing. Isn't this in that forest that the Coen brothers use frequently? Oh, Miller's Crossing, the tidal forest.
Yeah.
I think it has similar trees, so you can picture them. And I think it's so interesting when you describe them as, capturing a little beauty in this war-torn, ugly place. Did you notice that the bunker that I believe Masha's office is, whether it's the nurse's headquarters or that bunker is entirely made of those trees, of those trunks chopped down.
Yeah.
The wall, the ceiling, and the rest of the film, we see these dirt, ugly bunkers that generally the men are in. And this bunker it's this gorgeous like environment, but it's a bunker. It's a war bunker. And so that was a setting that stood out to me. Again, just going back to the composition, so many. And the one it's probably unfair because I think it's on the DVD cover, but it's of Ivan wandering through a bombed out former home or something. And all the shards of the wall have formed these sharp arrows pointing.
Perfect perspective, right? Yeah.
Yep. The way he's standing there all pointing at him. And I want to make sure we talk about Ivan and this performance by this kid, Nikolai Burliev, who I didn't recognize. We've both seen Andrei Rublev at this point. I didn't recognize until the scene where he actually rings a bell that he's the kid in Andrei Rublev, the bell maker. And I was like, well, no wonder this kid is so good here, because he goes on to give that stunning performance in Andrei Rublev. And the presence he has here, he's a few years younger. The way when he first shows up, when we first meet him mysteriously, he walks into camp and the younger lieutenant, Galtsev, doesn't know who he is. And he starts speaking to him with authority as an adult would speak, but he still carries this childish vulnerability. It's because he's already been working as a scout and there are superiors who know who he is. The way he's been able to balance that sort of maturity and youthful vulnerability is just such a hallmark of this movie.
I agree completely. And one of the defining moments of the performance for me is just before that character really succumbs to his trauma. And it's a fantasy sequence, but a fantasy sequence unlike the other dreams or nightmares that's actually occurring. It's one he's manifesting out of his own imagination. It's when he gets handed that knife.
Yeah.
Josh, and he's imagining him getting his vengeance. And the way the performer there goes from smile, or at least a moment of, it seems, relative comfort and happiness, to all of a sudden something being stirred within him once he holds that knife, and feeling so viscerally the thirst for vengeance that he has. You see how Tarkovsky's camera captures the moment where he hardens. And boy, does he harden.
Yeah.
Everything about his face becomes tougher and more aggressive and angry. And then he launches that knife against the wall. That's what then ignites this kind of House of Horrors sequence where he alone is within this space and imagining how it might play out if he's given his chance to do what he wants to do and enact his revenge on these Nazi soldiers. It's an incredible sequence visually, but maybe even more so because of the performance that's at its core.
There's another moment where there's a mortar attack on their camp, and, everyone's scurrying and trying to take cover. And he's, with them. And one of the soldiers tells him, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. And the way the kid just looks at him and says, I'm not afraid.
I'm not afraid.
He's not boastful. He's not, it's just, this is the fact is he has been so damaged and traumatized.
Yes.
He's legitimately not afraid.
It's
and there's something so tragic about that.
It's going to take a lot more than a few bombs in the distance to rattle this kid.
It's so sad.
And he does have to have that kind of 1,000-yard stare. And he certainly does.
Yeah. So in terms of, influence and, other war films, this might have nodded to when they're trying to sneak back across enemy lines via the boat, and Ivan is with them. It's nighttime and they're on the river it's almost more like a swampy area.
Yes.
Did you think of Apocalypse Now?
Yeah.
With the lights, the flares landing in the water. And this is something that other war films have used as well. But for some reason, I was taken directly to that sequence in Apocalypse Now, which used the flares so effectively in the water.
Yeah, very much. It would be a shocker to me if Coppola didn't claim the influence of Ivan's childhood on Apocalypse Now. Both Ivan's Childhood and The Steamroller and The Violin are streaming on the Criterion Channel and Max. They're also available VOD. Next up in the Tarkovsky Marathon, it will be Andrei Rublev, discussed for the second time here on Filmspotting, just about 20 years or 19 years apart. For more information about our marathon and upcoming shows, you can visit filmspotting.net/marathons or filmspotting.net/episodes. That's where we have our show calendar. Josh, that is our show. We'd love to hear from many of our listeners. They can email us anytime, feedback@filmspotting.net.
If you'd like to connect with us on social media, you can find Adam and the show on Instagram and Facebook. He's at Filmspotting. You can find me at Larson on Film. We are independently produced and listener supported. You can support the show by joining the Filmspotting family at filmspottingfamily.com. You can listen early and ad-free. You'll also get a weekly newsletter, monthly bonus episodes, and access to the entire show archive. For show t-shirts, Filmspotting Fest posters, or other merch, go to filmspotting.net/shop.
In those archives, other Tarkovsky, as we mentioned, Solaris and Andrei Rublev, part of that Overlooked Auteurs Marathon in 2006, episode 80, Mirror, episode 919, that was during our Sight and Sound Top 100 Blind Spots Marathon, and more Sean Baker. Talked about Tangerine on episode 547, or I should say guest hosts Scott Tobias and Keith Phipps did. We talked about the Florida Project on 652 with Sean Baker. Talked about Red Rocket on 851 and reviewed Honora on episode 990. In limited release, you can see a 4K restoration if you're fortunate enough to be in Chicago and can get to the Gene Siskel Film Center, a 4K restoration of Charles Burnett's Killer of Sheep. Also playing in limited release, a movie I am very curious to see, Josh, Secret Mall Apartment. It's a documentary about 8 Rhode Islanders who in 2003 created the title Secret Apartment in a busy mall and lived and filmed there for 4 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. In wide release, Joe Wright's Pride and Prejudice is getting re-released for its 20th anniversary. I might just have to drive the 20 miles down the road to see it. That's the nearest theater to me, Josh, that is showing it, but I do now love that film. The Wedding Banquet is also out. This is a remake of the Ang Lee film from 1993 about a man frustrated with his commitment-phobic boyfriend, played by SNL's Bowen Yang, who makes an arrangement with a friend, played by Kelly Marie Tran, a green card marriage in exchange for IVF. Further complicating things, Joan Chen, as the man's grandmother, she shows up unexpectedly to throw the wedding banquet of the title. Lily Gladstone co-stars. And you can also see Ryan Coogler's period horror film Sinners. That's what's on tap next week. In addition to Andrei Rublev, we will talk about vampires, I think.
Wait, they're vampires?
I don't know. They seem like they only came out at night.
Don't spoil it.
They seem like they only came out at night and they were interested in blood from the trailer. That's what I'm going with, Josh.
Filmspotting is produced by Golden Joe Dassault and Sam Van Halgren. Without Sam and Golden Joe, this show wouldn't go. Our production assistant is Sophie Kempenaar. Special thanks to everyone at WBEZ Chicago. More information is available at WBEZ.org. For Filmspotting, I'm Josh Larson.
And I'm Adam Kempenaar. Thanks for listening.
This conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.
Filmspotting is listener supported. Join the Filmspotting family at filmspottingfamily.com and get access to ad-free episodes, monthly bonus shows, our weekly newsletter, and for the first time, all in one place, the entire Filmspotting archive going back to 2005. That's at filmspottingfamily.com.